countdown. 3, 2.
Working out the kinks. What is up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new episode of Destination the Show. This is episode 85, final 2025 MLB mock draft and team best fits episode. My name is Jamie Cameron, joined as always by Jeremy Nygaard, who was just telling me about the last time you saw Nelly live, which was what year?
It was, I want to say it was 1999, but that was up in smoke, so maybe it was like 2000 or 2001. It's been a few handfuls of years.
You're so old.
Like 2 years older than you are, 3 years older than you are.
Yeah, the last time you saw Nelly, I was a toddler.
Yeah, well, you're still a toddler.
According to you.
Friday night at Target Field, Nelly post-game concert, Paul Skeens against Joe Ryan on the bump, both freshly minted all-stars. That's going to be quite the night, dude. You must be excited. You better get your rest in before Sunday, though.
Oh, I'll be plenty rested. I actually have a wedding to go to on Saturday as well. So, dude, I'll be fresh.
That sounds terrible. That sounds absolutely terrible. Leaving the house sounds terrible. Okay. We have a jam-packed episode to get to today. We are live streaming to work out some of the kinks from this time last year. And the reason that we're doing that, of course, is that the 2025 MLB draft kicks off this coming Sunday, July 13th. We're going to be live streaming through the entire day one, Jeremy, starting at 4:30. So starting at 4:30 Central, which is about 30 minutes before round one kicks off, the newly expanded day one, which includes rounds 1 through 3. So I believe we'll get 105 picks. So here's my question for you before we jump into our shenanigans from today. What is the over-under? Give me an over-under, a number of hours we're streaming for day one of the draft. And I'll give you the input of last year. I want to say we're at like 4.5, 5.
Yeah. I think 6.5 is probably 11 o'clock seems like the right time.
That sounds terrible.
It does. It sounds awful. I'll be doing this.
I don't know. That's going to be a struggle. Should be really fun. We'll go through some housekeeping stuff real quick before we get to what we're going to get to today. Housekeeping, you can support the show by liking and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform of choice. You can find all of our nonsense at YouTube. The handle there is at Destination the Show. You can find us on Twitter at DTS_pod1. The more friendly but more boring Blue Sky at Destination the Show. And if you want to get in touch and ask us a question, easiest way to do that is on social media, or the old-fashioned way, send us an email. That's destinationtheshow@gmail.com. So just really quick to roll through those night one draft plans again. This coming Sunday, 4:30 Central, you will find a link to that stream on the Destination the Show YouTube page. We will blast it out over the next few days. But if you want live reaction to all of the picks, with a particular focus on the Blue Jays, Red Sox, Twins, Cubs, Brewers, and Padres. What a weird collection of teams that we talk about. We will be reacting to every pick. We'll have guests come on to talk about picks from organizations that we are much, much less expert in. Should be a lot of fun. We'll see if Jeremy can stay awake till 11:30. That's what we're doing. Are you ready, my friend?
Let's go.
All right. Without further ado, here's what we thought might be fun for our last episode before the draft. We are going to go through a little bit of a mock draft exercise. So what we're going to do is we're going to try and go through 36 picks for the teams that we talk about the most. Blue Jays, Red Sox, Twins. Let me see if I can get the order right. Cubs, Brewers, and Padres. We're going to pause at those picks. We'll make a mock pick, and then we'll talk about players that have been connected with those organizations, what we think the best fits might be, and all of that good stuff. As far as the rest of the picks go, we're going to do our best to try and select picks that make sense based on steam that's been going around in the industry, based on kind of public-facing connections between organizations and players, and just try and have fun with it and talk through some of the prospects that we're most excited about before everything kicks off on Sunday. So, Jeremy, unlike last time, This time I'm going to go odds and you're going to go evens. Are you ready to jump in, dude?
Yep, bring it.
All right. So I'm going to try. This might be a little clunky at first because I'm going to try and track and make sure that we are not double selecting players. But first up, we have the Washington Nationals, fresh off firing their manager and GM a week prior to the draft, which is interesting. It really seems, Jeremy, like the Nationals are down to two possible picks at number one, being left-handed pitcher out of LSU, Cade Anderson, and then Ethan Holiday, who still by consensus is the number one player in the class. I haven't updated the consensus board in a day or so, but Cade Anderson is actually up to number two by consensus now. And it looks most likely that one of those two guys is going to be the pick at number one. I am picking for the Nationals, and I'm going to go with the number one player in the class. That is Ethan Holiday. I'm going with what I perceive to be the higher upside selection here. If you are making a bet that Holiday is going to be like a fringy hit tool with plus or double plus power, that's going to be an exceptional player for you. So Ethan Holiday, number one overall to the Washington Nationals, which puts you on the clock picking for the LA Angels.
So before I pick for the Angels,
yeah,
if Holiday doesn't go there, I feel pretty confident getting him for the Rockies at 4.
Okay.
Right.
Fair.
And so I circled him at 1 for you. I crossed him out at 4 for me in the Rockies. The other guy you considered at 1, Cade Anderson, seems like the most likely name to come off the clock here at 2 to the Angels. I have Anderson or Doyle, right? You take Anderson, I take Doyle. You take Holiday, I take Anderson. To me, I think that's a pretty safe feeling to have at this point. So number 2, Angels take Cade Anderson, and we'll see him in the majors by September 1st.
Yeah, I mean, where is he starting if the Angels take him? He's starting at AA, right? Rocket City, you'd have to imagine.
Yeah.
I think that makes sense. So now on the clock, I want to pause also and try and take stock of some bonus pool stuff when we get the opportunity along the way here, right? So we've had the top 2 players by consensus taken. Holiday has a comp ranking of 3.3. Anderson's is 3.4. So they are neck and neck. There's even a chance that Anderson could pip him by Sunday, which would be interesting. The next team up is the Seattle Mariners. They were the major beneficiaries of the draft lottery this year. I do just want to point out before I pick for the Mariners, their draft bonus pool is absolutely ridiculous. In terms of money, the combination of, like, we always talk, right, about capital. What do you have in terms of capital on the draft? And that takes the form of money and picks. They are loaded with both. I think their bonus pool is like close to 17 million, which is like 5 million more than the Twins. So they're in an interesting position where they can potentially float guys down, and that's something to keep an eye on. I'm considering a lot of different guys here. I think Seth Hernandez is a guy who makes sense given the Mariners' incredible track record of developing pitching. I also think he's going to be kind of a slow burn, prep right-handed pitcher. So I'm actually going to go in a different direction for the Mariners, and I'm going to go with the number 6 player by consensus, and that is Oregon State shortstop Iva Arquette. I'm taking the consensus top college bat in a class that doesn't have a lot of great ones, but Arquette's an explosive, outstanding athlete. I think the Mariners will like him at 3. That also leaves them open to do some interesting and creative things that we will get to a little bit later. So back over to you at number 4. Now picking for the Colorado Rockies, who, as you mentioned, maybe had their eyes on Ethan Holiday at 4.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is the closer we get, the more the top 4 has kind of been focused in on the 3 guys that have gone and Liam Doyle. And I've said for as many years as I've talked about the draft, it always makes sense for me. It always makes sense to me for the Rockies to take a pitcher. Right, this is their opportunity to take a pitcher, and here they have the ability, or they have the opportunity to take one of Jamie Arnold, Seth Hernandez, Liam Doyle. I think all of those make sense, but all the steam seems to be on them and hitters, right? And Arquette was a name that was on my list. Holiday was a name that was on my list. Ike Irish is a name on the list if they want to cut a deal. But the name that I'm going to go with is your consensus number 3 name, and that's prep shortstop Eli Willits. So not getting the prep shortstop or prep bat that they probably hoped originally, but it's Eli Willits at 4 to the Rockies for me.
Interesting. Okay. You threw me a little bit of a curveball there. I do think that's interesting. I really think it sounds like the Rockies are kind of hoping that Holiday is there for them at 4, and those do seem like the 2 likely landing spots for him. One thing of note that I find interesting, just to mention as a fun draft conspiracy theory, we talked a little bit about this on the Twitter space yesterday about how if you submit your medical records and or take a medical at the combine, you're guaranteed 75% of your slot value. Ike Irish did not submit his medicals, and so that's interesting. I think the thing that makes me wonder about is like, what is his fit at like 2 potentially as like a major underslot guy for the Angels? Maybe it's nothing, but it's an interesting curiosity if nothing else.
But the best fit for him in that scenario is the Mariners at 3.
Yep.
Right. When do the Rockies pick again? Like it's a while, so they're gonna float somebody down to the 40s. I just don't see that
45.
happening. 45. And the Mariners are a little more equipped at 35 to do that. And so that's why it's like I had Irish listed, but I think the thing that, and not now that we've kind of got past these top 4, if Holiday doesn't go 1, maybe it's that the Nationals preferred someone else. In my opinion, more likely it's that the Rockies are throwing way more money at him than the Nationals would.
Yeah, interesting.
And so that's kind of where we go Holiday, Anderson, Arquette, Willits, but I mean I think there's a really good chance it goes Anderson, Doyle, Arquette, Holiday.
Yep.
Either way, the draft starts at 5.
It does, and this is a really challenging spot for me to try and pick the St. Louis Cardinals, and the reason for that is if I'm the Cardinals, Eli Willits fits so much the type of profile hitter that I believe them to be kind of interested in. And so kind of thinking through what they might do here, just looking at names on the board. And one thing I want to do with this mock exercise is throw some creative things out there, right? Because we've talked, and the narrative has been throughout the entire cycle, how the top of this class is murky. There's maybe not this like really clear top tier of talent. Like if you go back to 2023 and you had those kind of big 5 that were the clear top 5. Here, we've talked about how that's maybe not the case. I think the Cardinals would consider Jamie Arnold at 5. That is not the name I'm going to go for. And I'm not necessarily going to someone connected to them or having steam to them. I want to shake things up a little bit and just start to anticipate the fact that the one thing that we can expect on draft night is surprises. That is the only thing that we should expect, even if they're small ones or moderate ones. So at 5, I'm going to have the Cardinals taking a prep hitter who's currently ranked 9th by consensus. That's JoJo Parker out of Purvis High School in Mississippi. Has a twin brother also in the top 100-ish range, which is kind of a fun and unique quirk. There's 2 or 3 sets of twins in this draft, but Parker, a really good hit tool, has a chance for kind of plus hit, above average power. And so JoJo Parker a little bit further down in that top 10 by consensus, currently at 9, but he's going number 5 to the Cardinals, which puts you back on the clock at number 6 with the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah, so at pick 6, I think everything that's out there right now is suggesting, whether it's right or not, that the Pirates would be better off going the college route than the prep route to line up with Paul Skeens, right, in his timeline, if they're going to keep him. the one name that gives me a little pause on that is Seth Hernandez next to Paul Skeens looks amazing.
Yep.
Right. But how does that timeline match up? He's a prep righty who could take 4 years, 5 years. Paul Skeens then free agency, and that doesn't work. So, as much as I would like to go Hernandez at that point, I think taking a college lefty makes more sense. And Jamie Arnold, who sat in that number 1 spot for quite some time, and could be with Skeens potentially 12 months from now, makes even more sense. So for me, number 6, Pirates, Jamie Arnold from Florida State University.
That's a really interesting pick. Again, not something I was necessarily expecting you to do. I do think, like, if you want to call out a bright spot for Pittsburgh, who aren't an excitingly run organization and who do not have an exciting ownership group, they have developed pitching very well, right? You look at Skeens, Keller, Bubba Chandler, who's had a few hiccups at AAA, but he's one of the best pitching prospects in baseball. They've done a really good job with that. So that's really interesting. I see your logic. We're now on to pick 7, which is the Miami Marlins. And now we're in an interesting spot because historically, one of the things that Marlins have done well is develop prep pitching, right? And so if you look here, we have Seth Hernandez just sitting there at 7, who's the number 5 consensus player, easily the top prep arm in this class. But all of the steam for the Marlins has been that they're really eyeing a prep bat. And we should also consider that this current Marlins administration is different from the one who drafted Thomas White, Noble Meyer, those guys a couple of years ago with Peter Bendix heading up the front office. So I'm not going to go Seth Hernandez because I also want to keep things a little bit interesting here. So we're going to go for another prep infielder, this time number 8 by consensus, Billy Carlson out of Corona High School in California. A little bit older for the class, but this is like a slam dunk defensive profile plus arm. You are counting on some projection with the offensive profile getting polished up a little bit more. But if it does, you're talking about someone who is potentially average or better with every tool. A little bit older for the class, like I mentioned, but all of this team has been Marlins being all over prep infielders, which I think is interesting. So I'm going to take Billy Carlson to the Marlins with the 7th pick, which puts you on the board for the first team that we pay a little bit more attention to, which is the Toronto Blue Jays. So why don't you make the pick here, Jeremy, and then we'll dig into like some other options given kind of other scenarios and who the Blue Jays might be interested in. You're muted. Good times.
It happened to me for the first time in the radio.
Yes, I'm so glad that we're live streaming and you did that.
There was some noise over in the laundry room area, so I hit the mute. Before I give you the pick, I want to kind of talk you through why I make the pick.
Okay.
So it all sounds like there's 2 demographics that the Blue Jays are going to choose from, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're going to either choose a college pitcher like they did last year, or they're going to choose a prep shortstop. Having seen 4 prep shortstops already come off the board,
mm-hmm.
It would make more sense now to go value, right? And so I think the best player that makes the most sense at number 8 for the Blue Jays is left-handed pitcher from Tennessee, Liam Doyle, who
Mm-hmm.
could go as high as 2. But to go number 8 to Toronto feels like a steal. If he goes 2 and those top 4 don't change, I think what that does is it pushes one of these prep shortstops down into the Blue Jays' lap.
Yep.
And they make them. So that's where I'm at with number 8. Doyle just seems like the best value pick there. but I think they would love to take JoJo Parker if he was available. I think Carlson would be a pretty good consolation prize.
Mm-hmm.
If Jamie Arnold was there, I think that's an easy pick. But in my opinion, Toronto sits at a really good spot at 8 because they're going to get a top level player. And if it goes in a different route, if with those first 7, they might have their choice between a really good pitcher and a really good shortstop. And then we get to kind of see what they're thinking. But for me, the way that the board went, pretty easy to make the pick of Liam Doyle.
Yeah. I do think you laid that out really nicely. Toronto's pitching development does seem to have come around a little bit recently, right? There's more success stories that they're seeing. Trey Savage is a great example, who was taken last year. He's already kind of soaring and dominating in Double-A. He's been really, really strong. I do think Doyle makes a ton of sense for them, and you nailed it, I think, with who they've been interested in. I do want to call out, because we do some work for a Blue Jays adjacent site, who potentially makes sense. And like, I think you covered most of it, Jeremy, but in terms of college pitchers, I think anyone who's available, they would consider Doyle, Jamie Arnold, and then maybe to a slightly lesser extent, Kyson Witherspoon would be someone they would consider around this range, the top college righty in the class. And then on the prep side, as you mentioned there, JoJo Parker, I think Billy Carlson, if available, absolutely. And then potentially Steele Hall and Kason Cunningham would be kind of just a half step down in their estimation. So I think that's the cluster of players that the Blue Jays would be looking at within those 2 demographics. And as you mentioned, they're in an interesting spot, right? In that if we see a couple, even one major surprise in the first 7 picks ahead of them, they could end up with a player who they like a ton, who was way higher on their board that they anticipated not having. So I do like the spot that the Blue Jays are in. I would just add, from a kind of capital perspective in terms of money and picks, they don't have a ton of either. So they really need to, they're like the Cubs in that they need to ensure that they hit with their higher draft picks to keep that farm system ticking along, because they're a revenue payee. They don't have the bonus of comp round A or comp round B rotating picks like other teams that we talk through a lot. So that puts me on the board at 9 with the Cincinnati Reds. Interesting spot to be in here. They've leaned heavily into college pitching and prep shortstops in recent seasons, thinking Chase Burns and Rhett Lauder, college teammates at Wake Forest. And then on the prep shortstop side, Tyson Lewis, Sammy Stafora from a couple of drafts ago have been at least like solid looking players for Cincinnati. Looking at the board here again, like, and like this could be silly on, I could look so silly on draft day because he could go number 1, number 2, number 3. I'm having a little bit of a hard time finding a landing spot for Seth Hernandez at the moment. I don't necessarily think he makes a ton of sense in Cincinnati. I do think what you have in Cincinnati is kind of an emerging young core of pretty interesting players. They have a ton of good pitching. They can certainly use more bats in their system, and I think this is a really logical spot for Ike Irish. You're talking about a profile that may not be a catcher, right? Most people seem to think he's destined for a corner outfield spot, but he's a good athlete. He has kind of freaky adjustability in his swing. He can really get to stuff outside the strike zone well. Good power, improve consistently against SEC competition. And although you could ding the kind of defensive position if he doesn't stick at catcher, this is a really solid chance for like above average hit, above average power as a pro. So like Ike Irish at number 9 for the Cincinnati Reds, which puts you on the board. And I'm so glad you have evens, because you have the White Sox and I have no idea what to think.
Well, I'm going to stick to my list here.
Okay.
And what I wrote was prep shortstops, and then I had a list of them. And the 4th guy that's on that list is available. His name is Kason Cunningham. So I'm going to just stick with that, and I'm going to go Kason Cunningham to the White Sox at 10. And I feel like that makes as much sense as anything for what the White Sox do. And I think whether you went Irish or whether you went Hernandez, it was going to be Cunningham for me.
Okay. Fair enough. Yeah, I gotta say, of all the teams that and we don't do White Sox related content, but I don't have a good sense of what the White Sox might do with this pick. They're on track for a lottery pick in 2026, which promises to be a good class. So they should just try and continue to stockpile as much upside. And they've done well via trade and making their farm system more interesting and bringing in impact guys. So I'll give them props for that. And that puts me back on the board at 11 with the Athletics. I mean, the Athletics have such a type recently, right? They have leaned into fast-moving college bats. So 2024, Nick Kurtz, 2023, Jacob Wilson, maybe the most wrong I've been about a prospect in the last couple of years. I was not a fan. But that's a good one to kind of figure out what went wrong there. The Athletics are tough. I don't love the college bat options here a ton for them specifically. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to go local for the Athletics and go in a little bit of a different direction. They have been tied fairly heavily to a college pitcher from UC Santa Barbara. That is, of course, Tyler Bremner. Had a slow start to the year, had a really strong finish. Fastball up to 98 with good carry at the top of the zone. Really, really good changeup with a ton of horizontal break. And then a slider that I think needs a little bit of work and some work on command stuff too. But he had really strong results. And the A system is not resplendent with good arms. So I'm going to take Tyler Bremner, who's currently 13th by consensus, at number 11 to the Athletics, which puts you back on the board at 12 with the Texas Rangers.
So what I have with the Rangers is this is kind of the floor for Parker. But then with Irish, I think Irish would have been a natural fit for them as well.
For sure.
But then it gets back into the prep shortstops, right? And so even though I think the floor for Steele Hall is Tampa Bay, and I think that makes a ton of sense.
Mm-hmm.
With the board falling the way that it's falling, I'm going to go Steele Hall to the Rangers at 12.
Interesting. Okay. I feel like you ruined one of the most steamy picks in the entire draft class, which is Steele Hall to the Rays at 14.
Which makes a ton of sense. And draft night, because the Rays have a huge pool. If they want him at 14, they can get him past 12.
Yep.
I do think that makes sense, but we'll talk more at 14 when I get there.
Fair enough. Okay. Let's see who's up at 13. We've got the San Francisco Giants. This is another interesting situation just in terms of front office personnel. Buster Posey in the mix now. Obviously, they shook things up big time with the Devers trade with the Red Sox, which we still haven't really spoken about that. That was crazy. I don't have a great sense for what San Francisco might do. Not a team that we talk about a ton or a ton of steam that we've seen, but I think there's two kind of paths forward here. And I'll kind of talk my way through and into one. One, we see just like stacking up on the board at this point, there is a kind of cluster of college bats, and this is around the range in which those start to make sense. There's also a couple of a really strong cluster of prep infielders available, and that's actually the direction I'm going to go here. I'm going to go a little further down the board and have the Giants take shortstop Daniel Pierce out of Mill Creek High School in Georgia. Pierce is a really this is going to sound like uninspiring, but he's just like pretty good at everything. It's like absolutely a pro shortstop profile, good arm, good runner. I think there's some polish that needs to happen on the offensive profile, but in a really diverse cluster of prep infield profiles, Pierce is maybe the best all-rounder. So I'll take him at 13 for the Giants, and that puts you on the clock at 14 with the Tampa Bay Rays.
So I think if the board fell like this or similar to this, I think Kyson Witherspoon makes a lot of sense here at 14 to the Rays. If Steele Hall's gone, but because they have this giant bonus pool and Seth Hernandez should be gone already, I'm going to just say there's not a lot of opportunities for teams at this point. I mean, maybe if we want to get down into Comp A, but I'm going to say Seth Hernandez over Slot to the Rays at 14, and that's a steal at 14.
Yeah,
but when it got outside of that, really when we got past the Blue Jays, right, where does he fit and at what price? And I think we saw it yet last year with some really good arms skipping over the draft and going to college.
Yeah.
I don't know that Hernandez is in that boat, but I do think that if the money's not right, it's an option. So I do think he'll ultimately go higher than this, but at this point in time, the Rays would be a natural stopping point because of the bonus pool that they have. So I'm going to go Seth Hernandez finally off the board to the Rays 14.
That would be a wild outcome, but and I don't think that's going to happen for 1 second. But I do think that's representative of the kind of mess that we're going to see on draft night, right? And I feel like we had solid logic models for the picks that we've made so far, and we got ourselves to Seth Hernandez at 14, which feels crazy. Just catching up now on comments, which shows how long it's been since we've live streamed. But Bill says, love the content. I miss the space on Twitter last night. Can one listen to it? I love that the comments obscure Jeremy's face. That might be my favorite feature of those. Can one listen to it? Still not familiar with spaces. I actually don't think I recorded it, Bill, so my bad. But we're going to essentially rehash all of that stuff on draft day anyway. So you just missed me blabbering for an hour. I promise you'll get plenty more of it as we get to draft night here. Okay, that puts me on the board at, let's see, what pick are we at now? 15 to the Red Sox. Okay, I'm going steam here. There are a few kind of player to organization connections which have been really strong just in terms of industry steam over the past couple of weeks, and I'm leaning into one here, and that is going to be the Red Sox taking Gavin Thien. I have him listed as a third baseman / outfielder. Jeremy, I'm gonna get a take on your wry smile in just a second. I have him listed as a third baseman outfielder. He's currently 14th by consensus. He was one of the best prep hitters in the country last summer. Had a little bit of an up and down 2025, but just a really solid offensive profile, chance for above average hit, above average power. I like Thien a ton. He's also someone who's been connected to the Twins. We'll talk about them in a minute. But what do you think of that pick, Jeremy, before we pause and talk through other options for the Red Sox?
Yeah, so I actually had him listed on as a potential float to their second pick.
Okay.
Now they could get creative, and however, if they can find an underslot guy at 15 to take, typically teams will take the underslot guy first and then float the bigger guy down because you can do that, as opposed to taking the overslot guy and then hoping the right guy falls. So I actually had him as a going at 35 or 33, excuse me, and having them go underslot with a college hitter here. But either way, I think it works out. I do like that pick for the Red Sox, and I've heard his name connected there a lot in the last couple of days.
Okay, so let's talk about other Red Sox options before we turn it back to you at 16 for the Twins. I do think this is the part of the board where we're going to see a little bit of a mini run on the college, the cluster of kind of second tier below Iva Arquette college bats. A number of those have been connected to the White Sox. I think guys who make sense, potentially Gavin Keelan, Tennessee infielder out of Wisconsin, Brendan Summerhill, outfielder out of Arizona, Wahiva Aloy, Merrick Houston, shortstop out of Wake. In addition to that Fiend connection, I think are all guys who potentially make sense for the Red Sox there at 15. That puts you on the clock. Again, glad I don't have the pressure of this pick. People are going to be mad at you, whatever you say. You're on the clock at 16 for the Minnesota Twins. So walk us through your rationale, who you're going to take, and then we'll talk about some other options too.
So I definitely would have gone Pierce or Hall at 16.
Okay.
They're both gone.
They are.
So now we're looking at college hitters, just like you said, and I think there's a handful of really good ones. There are really, according to your board here, Nyans is really the only prep hitter available at this range, and I would be a fan of that pick. But since you said you're not going to put the pressure, or you're going to put the pressure on me, I'm gonna throw it back to you. Okay, and here's why. Because when we were texting about this earlier today, you say to me, "It wouldn't surprise me."
Yeah. Okay.
If the Twins went a little down the board,
yeah, it wouldn't.
And really, it's a whole group now of hitters where it could be any of them, right? Yep. And I'm not a big fan of Houston. Okay, I think Keelan would be a good pick, but if he's going to be a second baseman, let's get something better than that. I could take Jace Lavalette because I think that would be fun.
Not for me.
Summerhill, what does Summerhill do for people at this point? Not much.
He's actually slipped quite. Let's talk about Summerhill for just a second. Sorry to cut across you. He was like firmly entrenched in the teens for basically the whole draft cycle, and he has been faded, like not massively, but he's dropped to 24 on the board that I'm looking at by consensus. I know that's not a ton, but he has ratings as low as 80th now. And so I think some folks raising concern about the kind of extra base impact and like the athleticism and the power numbers don't kind of match up in his profile. And so I don't know how much that would excite me, honestly.
Okay. So the name that you threw at me is where I'm going to go here.
Okay.
So under slot, probably.
People are not going to like this pick.
I know. That's why I'm doing it. Okay. Under slot at 16.
Yeah.
College outfielder from the University of Indiana, Devin Taylor.
Yep.
28th by consensus. Now, here's why I'm going that way. You are all over Luke Keeschel.
Correct.
Right? The type of player, and you're more into these measurement tools than I am. You're all over him. You were on the right guys last year. So when you all of a sudden throw Devin Taylor out, okay, why? What, you tell me why the Twins would be on him at 16?
Well, so a couple of things I think are worth pointing out, right? So to me, this would absolutely be under slot at 16. So he's currently ranked 31st by consensus. He's been in that late 20s, early 30s range the entire cycle. He's been super consistent. We also talk always about how college hitters get pushed up the closer we get to the draft, right? We talk a lot. I talk like ad nauseum on here about how we're looking for steady offensive improvement year over year. That's something he's shown, albeit against less exciting competition. He's absolutely a corner outfielder, right? He's a corner profile with not crazy supplementary tools. It is not a crazy arm. It is not like a crazy run tool. He is going to have to mash to provide value. And so I realize people are going to find that unexciting. But he's been a really consistent hitter. 18 home runs this year, walked 19% of the time and struck out just 11, 169 WRC plus. Maybe the most just like steady, consistent improvement of a college bat in this class. And so why would he appeal is because he checks a number of boxes that the Twins would like, right? One is adjusted production numbers, steadily improving over his college career. Two, and I'm making assumptions here because I haven't seen a ton of like content and interviews. If he was to be the pick, he would be someone that super impressed them in interviews at the combine. They super weigh their interviews and their character stuff a ton. That was one of their kind of tiebreakers with Keishel, was they were so impressed with his drive and his work ethic. And by all accounts, Devin Taylor gets great reviews for that. The other thing I'll throw out there here is, and I'll shout someone out who reached out on Twitter today. Michael last name. I'm sorry, Michael. This is bad content.
Not that many Michael. Just
Michael Goodell, right? So he reached out and said, how about this for a hypothetical? You take Andrew Fisher at 116, and then you take a prep with your comp, and then another prep at 54 in the second round. And that just got me thinking on this a little bit. I would guess that the Twins have Devin Taylor higher on their board than he is by consensus. You can likely get him at savings. You have a comp A pick, which has a substantial slot bonus attached to it, 2.75 million ballpark. Then you can go way over for a prep that you like a ton, be it an arm or a prep shortstop in the second tier, to kind of balance out that ceiling you're going for. Now you're blurry. You brought this on yourself.
I did. I moved. I knelt myself down because my cable thing got funky. So
there you go. So I think, like, if we go back to last year, people were so unexcited by the Kalen Culpepper pick. People were like, "This is boring." Da 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 da. People wanted this. People wanted that. People wanted a college catcher. Well, guess what? Kalen Culpepper is now a top 100 prospect, back end guy on 3 different industry lists. He's hitting 385 at AA. You could not ask for a better. Oh, by the way, he looks like he's going to stick it short. You could not ask for a better first season from Kalen Culpepper. Barely missed a game. So I think we should just like open our minds to the possibility that they go down board a little bit and then they get what you might consider a higher upside guy later at 36 or 54.
So going back to last year's draft and going back to teams we cover, the Brewers took Braylon Payne under slot, way down the board.
Yeah.
And then turned around and just had a freaky draft where they were able to. So
that was fun.
If the Twins were to do that, I mean, you're talking about, that pushes a prep to them at 36 probably, but we could talk about another prep in the next round and another, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, for sure.
Whoever, and then round 11, all of a sudden it's like, there's going to sit in the middle of round 11. There's going to be a guy and they're going to have money to do it. And so if there's any conviction at all that they can take one of these college hitters that they like more because they've done this really well, if they take one of these guys and can save some money, it's going to be huge. And whether that's Devin Taylor or whether that's Fisher or whether that's anybody, Conrad, anybody like that,
like him too,
it makes a ton of sense because this is where college hitters start. And I don't know that it's necessarily a huge gap in between them.
Yeah.
And maybe it's not Devin Taylor, but he fits the profile. The exit velo, the can hit. Where does he play? Let's not worry about it. And they've also seen him do it on the Cave. Yep. So I think that's another thing. But the makeup thing, like that's the giant checkbox, and we don't know that. But that I think is certainly a possibility.
And let's just one more quick thing before we move on here. I think I can speak for you when I say this. The Twins organization has beyond earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to their last couple of drafts, right? If we go back to we talked about this again on the space yesterday, 2023, Jenkins fell into their lap. Throw him out for a second. Charlie Soto was their pick in Comp A, fringy top 100 guy. Keishel was their pick in the second round, top 100 guy, already made his debut.
Maybe 20 player of all time.
2024, Kalen Culpepper, already a top 100 prospect. Dason Hill in round 2 or 3, whatever it was, Comp B, whatever it was, 69th overall, already a top 100 guy. I mean, they have created a gazillion top 100 prospects in the last couple of years, which is exactly what they need to do to kind of thrive and keep the system churning.
Yep.
Other fits that I think make sense. Fiend absolutely makes sense if he's there. He was taken by the Red Sox in this scenario. The Twins have done a ton of work on him. Nyans, you mentioned, big time power threat. Nyans is exciting. Like if he hits, like not literally hits, if he hits like as a prospect, he is like a potentially like a 30 homer bat. That's really fun. And then other college infielders that are more, or other college bats, pardon me, that are more in the range. Gavin Keelan. Makes a ton of sense. Brendan Summerhill, Wahiva Aloy, maybe. Merrick Houston, maybe. I'm not super in on Merrick Houston. It's not that exciting to me. One college arm I would call out, Tyler Bremner. I think if he was on the board, and I don't think he will be at 16, but I think the Twins would strongly consider him. He is very much, he kind of has the kind of pitch plot that they like in their guys. Very kind of vertical, high ride fastball, all that good stuff. So those are the potential Twins guys. Okay, we're moving on to the Cubs. Another team that we cover. This is another steam pick, I think. It sounds like the Cubs have been heavy in on and potentially expect Wahiva Aloy to be there for them at 17. I think he is a pick that makes a lot of sense. The Cubs never have a lot of picks. They never have a lot of money. They have, in recent years, leaned into college guys with kind of plus upside. So thinking about like Cam Smith is a good example. Aloy, he has some of the highest ceiling of the college bats. He could also flame out. Definitely think there's some hit tool risk, some swing decision stuff that needs to be worked on. But that sounds like a kind of steamy pick for the Cubs. Other folks they have been connected with, maybe if they were interested in going slightly underslot, Ethan Conrad, super athletic outfielder from Wake Forest, D2 transfer this year. Anthony Ianson, starting pitcher for LSU. That would be like majorly underslot, but he's a name I've heard the Cubs are interested in or like. So that's the Cubs at 17. That puts you back on the board at 18 with the Diamondbacks.
Yeah, so the Diamondbacks pick 18 and then also pick at 29. So I think what they're going to do here, the name that I've heard a lot with them is Caden Bodine, a college catcher. I did actually see, I had him listed with the Twins too, which I don't like. But if we go Bodine to the Diamondbacks 18, I think that the Diamondbacks will be able to float a high school guy down to their next pick. So I'm just hoping you don't take that guy because I didn't tell you to take him off the board.
Ha ha ha. Okay, cool. I'll do what I can. We're back to Baltimore at 19. Just want to take a peek at the board and see who's left. Kyson Witherspoon is left on the board. I do not think he's going to be there at this point. I would find that quite shocking. I don't know if there's a fit that I love a ton for Baltimore. They tend to kind of lean heavy into like big time athletic traits. I'm going to go 23rd by consensus outfielder from Texas A&M, former number one prospect in the class, Jace Laviolette. The Baltimore Orioles are also kind of resplendent with picks. So they're another option that can kind of use their bonus pool creatively, but Jace to the Orioles here. And that puts you back on the clock at 20 for the Brewers.
So before we get to the Brewers pick, the Orioles also have been a team that has kind of laughed in the face of swing and miss, right? And so that would be like Lavalette and Nyans are both guys that I had, like the top two guys with the Orioles that I had tied to. So there we go. So the Brewers at 20, I got to type this in because, I'm trying to timestamp. So Lavalette was on that list. I'm going to go Merrick Houston. Not the typical third baseman, right? But what the Brewers have done a lot is take that sort of player, that type of player. There were some other names that I had written down, but he was the one after Laviolette, so that's where I'm going to go Merrick Houston to the Brewers at 20. Let's talk through some other guys that could potentially go off there because they certainly have a type,
Yeah.
right?
They do. They do have a couple of types, right? They have the type that is a power hitting corner infield guy, like Brock Wilken, or oh my God, who's my Tennessee guy? Blake Burke from last year, who I loved. They also have a type of small, speedy contact guy, and I do think like Merrick Houston fits that profile a little better, with a good approach to boot. Other guys that the Brewers have been connected with, and I just like. My Brewers thing is always going to be like they will zag when everybody else zigs. So I'm always expecting them to do something weird. They did something weird in 2023. They did something super weird last year when they took pain, and then they took like a million preps. Players they've been connected with, so take this for what it's worth because they're always so creative. They've been connected with both catchers, Caden Bodine and Luke Stevenson, Merrick Houston, Jace Laviolette. And then on the prep side, I think this kind of just like opportunism piece here, right? So Steele Hall, if he was there, which I don't think he would be. Gavin Feen, if he was there, I don't think he would be. And then Xavier Nyans is another guy that there's been a little bit of connection between to the Brewers on. And I guess like if you want to say that Brewers type of that kind of power profile corner guy, he's almost like the prep version of that. So I guess I can make sense of it that way. But the Brewers are another org that always play their cards close to their vest and do a pretty good job of keeping us on our toes on draft night. So those would be other guys. And then it's back to me for Houston at 21. Dude, I got to start thinking about value at some point. This doesn't necessarily make sense as like a fit or a connection because this person shouldn't be on the board anymore. I'm going Kyson Witherspoon. This is an insane value pick at this point. I think he is 10th by consensus. He has his low ranking is 15 on the boards that we track. So Witherspoon, who I don't think will be available, but at some point we gotta just stockpile the ridiculous talent that's left on the board, and someone will slide on draft night for sure.
Right. I'm glad you did that because picking for the Braves at 22, I was going to go college pitcher. It would have been hard to not take Witherspoon if he was available, but I do think with the board as it is at 22, Braves taking Gage Wood, World Series, college World Series darling, who could catapult his way up even further. What's your concern been with Gage Wood forever? The fact that he hasn't really pitched a ton because he's had issues,
shoulder stuff,
and so he comes out, strikes out 30 some batters in a game, and here he goes all the way up to 22. So Gage Wood to the Braves at 22, which puts you on the clock with everybody's favorite team in the Central, the Kansas City Royals.
I like the Royals. Okay, Kansas City Royals are another team that we need to just kind of be aware of their situation. They have a comp pick for Bobby Witt MVP prospect promotion stuff, which is like that's such a huge boost for them. So they pick at 23, that's their first rounder. They pick at 28. That's their comp pick. They pick in the second round, and then they also pick in comp B at 71. So the Royals are like flush with cash and flush with picks. And for those reasons, I see them going with a prep college split with their first two picks. That would make a lot of sense. I think there's a number of candidates that make sense here. They have done very well developing arms in recent seasons, and I think there are some prep arms that might make sense. Someone like Cam Appenzeller, someone like Cruz Schoolcraft. They've also been connected with prep infielders and prep outfielders. So I'm going to go a little bit off board and take Sean Gamble out of IMG Academy. I have him listed as a shortstop outfielder. I think maybe outfielder long-term, a little bit older for the class, 19, left-handed hitter, originally out of Iowa. So Sean Gamble with Kansas City's first pick, which is setting them up to still have a ton of flexibility with their remaining picks. And that puts you back on the board at 24 with the Detroit Tigers.
Yeah, so at this point in time, I do think like Gavin Keelan would be great value for the Tigers.
Yeah.
Could move quick. And the Tigers are kind of in it right now, right?
Yeah, they are.
And so unless there was a pitcher that we could confidently say, yeah, he can help this team win now. Is Riley Quick that guy? I'm not sure at 24. And there's not like, at least to my knowledge, there's not like that overpowering bullpen guy that would make sense to take right now, right? To have for the run. So as far as value goes, Gavin Keelan is Christian Moore came out of the same school, right? Similar profiles, went pretty high. Now he's in the major leagues. Gavin Keelan going to the Tigers at 24 seems like a really good value pick that could help this team in its competitive window. So I'm going to go Tigers, Gavin Keelan at 24.
Oh, that would be such an annoying pick. Okay. That puts me up for the San Diego Padres, the last kind of team that we talk about the most. I feel like the Padres have to be the easiest. They're just the opposite of the Angels. I think it is 8 consecutive drafts in which they have taken a prep player with their first overall pick. And I got to say, AJ Preller's front office has an incredible hit rate on these guys. Like, truly impressive. So I think what we're doing, our thought exercise, is we're looking at the highest ranked prep players left on the board. So I think they would entertain Josh Hammond. I think they would entertain Xavier Nyans. But the pick I'm going to go for is a high octane arm in Cruz Schoolcraft, 6'8" left-hander out of Oregon, fastball up to 97, nasty slider. The Padres do really well with their player dev with preps. I think you could slot in a number of Slater DeBrun as a guy who makes sense. I think you could slot in a number of different preps here, and I would be like, yeah, okay, sure, makes sense. I'm sure they'll do quite well. So I'm taking Cruz Schoolcraft for the Padres at 25, which puts you up at 26 with the Phillies.
So I will just say, based on what the Giants have done in the draft the last couple of years, if they take Cruz Schoolcraft at 13, I will not be surprised at all. And he's actually.
You mean because of Eldridge?
Eldridge and the other guy. They took like the last Crawford. Was it Crawford?
Justin Crawford. Wait, he's a Philly, no?
No, maybe it wasn't a Crawford. Was Eldridge 2 years ago or last year? I feel like their last.
Eldridge was 2023. Last year they took Tibbs, who just got traded to the Red Sox.
So maybe it was a year before. But anyway, they've taken guys that just kind of fit that profile. Anyway, not a big deal.
Reggie Crawford.
Reggie Crawford.
There you go.
Same type of player, right? What year was that?
That was 22.
So they went 22 and 23, same types of player. Anyway, with the Phillies at 26, they like to go the prep route. The best prep player is Xavier Nyans. That makes a ton of sense to me. So I'm going to go Phillies, Xavier Nyans at 26. You don't like it. Tell me why.
I don't not like it. No, I don't not like it. It's fine. I was thinking about someone else. That's okay. Xavier Nyans is great. I love it. Okay, let's move on to last pick of the first round. Technically, the Cleveland Guardians at 27. Okay, what makes sense for Cleveland? I am looking for hitterish guys. Let's see. Okay, I think I'm gonna go Slater DeBrun. Slater DeBrun with the Cleveland Guardians. 29th by consensus, outfielder out of Oregon, 5'9", 195, really good bat to ball skills, kind of that pesky spark plug type offensive profile. Cleveland has typically leaned into guys with really strong bat to ball skills. People who know how to annoy you, work at bats, think Stephen Kwan. So Slater DeBrun, I think, kind of fits the bill. I think I've heard him connected to the Tigers too on the back end of the first round. But Slater DeBrun, 27th overall to Cleveland, which puts you back on the clock with Kansas City at 28. That is their PPI pick for Bobby Witt, finishing top 3 in the MVP voting. They have taken Sean Gamble. What are you going to do with the Royals at 28?
Well, here's the thing. So, a couple things. When I took Bodine at 18 for the Diamondbacks and a money-saving move, Slater DeBrun wasn't going to be available to you at 27 because he was going to go to the Diamondbacks at 29, which you
Sorry,
had.
buddy. Sorry, buddy.
You obviously don't read the private chat where I told you that. There you see it. Anyway, that's fine.
This is why we do a trial run before draft night.
This is fine because I wasn't picking for 29.
Now I'm stuck. And now I've been foisted by my own mistake.
But you also made reference when you drafted Gamble at 23 that you were going to go prep college at 23 and 28.
Wow.
But I don't know what you were thinking at 28.
I'm thinking college pitcher at 28.
So why don't you just tell me the pitcher that you
I actually did have someone in mind, right? But what I'm thinking is, and you can pick your guy, but what I'm thinking is you take a prep guy, and you could do this in either order, but you take a college arm because the Royals have done very well with their pitching development recently, and they could use some restocking of that at the lower levels. You take one of the kind of second tier of college arms. So it could be Riley Quick. It could be Patrick Forbes.
Right.
Could be Zach Root. Any of those guys, I think, make decent sense. And then they're still loaded in terms of bonus pool for potentially another kind of big swing at a prep with their next pick. So that's kind of what I had in mind.
Right.
So pick your favorite, I guess.
Well, so I have Royals, and then I have Quick. So okay. Riley Quick is going to be the pick there. If you had like specific in mind, but there's kind of a whole glut of those guys. So Quick to the Royals at 28 to pair with your pick of Gamble makes sense. Now you get to pick for the Diamondbacks at 29 to pair with my pick of Bodine, and know that you have money, so you can get creative here.
I'm so mad, because I've put myself in a spot, and now there are. Oh, I'm really upset, dude.
We're gonna sleep okay tonight.
I'm not. I'm gonna be mad. Okay, here's what I'm gonna do. We got the gist of the prep college combo, so I'm gonna take a prep here, one that I can afford to pay well, and one that I personally like a ton. One who's also been connected to the Twins, by the way, big eyes emoji, which you will absolutely hate, I think, and that's Jaden Falsky. I'm taking Jaden Falsky, who is a prep catcher, left-handed hitting out of Illinois, committed to LSU, 6'3", 200. Just like with any prep catcher, the question is, like, is he going to stick? Who knows? I think evaling catcher defense is super difficult. He's a really good athlete, though. Really like the offensive profile here, kind of chance for above average hit, above average power. Falsky's someone you need to pay well. I think he's in this kind of comp range for me. So I'm doubling up on catcher, which I don't necessarily think the Diamondbacks would do, but I love Falsky's offensive profile. Now that I've suffered for that mistake, we get back-to-back picks with Baltimore at 30 and 31. They've already taken Jace Laviolette, so it's over to you. What you gonna do?
Okay, well let's talk about this first. Falsky is about as set at catcher as Ike Irish is.
Sure, fair.
Right? But since we both have to make a pick for the Orioles, why don't we just talk through this?
Okay.
Because it doesn't make sense for me to do one thing and then you to do another thing. So they take Laviolette, who will probably, at this point, him going at 19, if that's where he goes, that's going to be what he gets.
Mm-hmm.
So
you can be a round slot, yeah.
Yeah. So at this point, you can take kind of two guys just kind of by the board and pay him slot, or you get creative and you take one guy down board and then you throw money at a high school guy. And so, like, what would be the Orioles' objective here? Because they got the high upside hitter, right? They also have gone through their period of time where they have just absolutely loaded farm systems, and now what's really happening with their major league team. I do think one guy that makes sense, like if I was just picking here and then letting you do it, I think Luke Stevenson makes sense. With just kind of what their situation is from a value perspective. But does that then open up the opportunity to do something different? Like looking at your board, there's not another prep. Like if we just go by the board, everybody's a college guy from this point forward. That's not how it's going to be. Right?
Yeah. 100%. And I think you're going to have now we're really starting to get into the range of picks where we're wondering what people's asking price is going to be. So if you take Stevenson, I think that's fine. I think they can afford to take the prep that they most like with their next pick to balance out the Stevenson, Laviolette kind of profile or portfolio of guys that they've taken so far. So that's who you're going for, is Stevenson?
Yeah, let's go Stevenson, because I don't think he's going to come in over slot. And now if you really like a prep guy that may still sign, you can still get that done.
I think that I think that they have the money that they want to take anybody that they want here. There's a couple of prep shortstops, pardon me, in this range that I like. Ryan Mitchell is one guy out of Tennessee, 18 years old, 6 foot 180, kind of a left-handed hitter, well-rounded profile, good feel for the strike zone, good hit tool. I like him quite a bit. He's currently 41st by consensus. If you wanted to go pitcher, Aaron Watson is a guy who is a prep right-hander out of Florida who pardon me. He's a prep righty out of Florida who just has like a really great frame. 6'5", 205 right-hander. The stuff's really ticked up. If you wanted to get really crazy and lean into risk, you could go Jack Bauer. He's ranked 44th by consensus, left-hander out of Illinois. He's been up to 103 with the fastball. That doesn't seem real. But you could afford to pay any of these guys probably their asking price, given the amount of picks of money that the Orioles have here. They haven't. I'm trying to remember like prep pitching profiles they've leaned into. I'm going to go Ryan Mitchell, prep shortstop out of Tennessee, to the Orioles at 31, which puts you back on the clock at 32 for the Brewers.
All right, so I think we all feel like in a typical year what the Brewers are going to do is take a prep pitcher with spin rate, high spin rates, right? Jack Bauer. Does Jack Bauer, does he give you like Miz vibes from the left side?
No, not in terms of the delivery. And like the frame is pretty different too. He's like 6'4", Miz is like 6'7", and gets like crazy extension. Bauer can definitely spin the ball. I think there's some strike throwing inconsistency stuff.
Okay, but
some
that's
stuff to work on. Yeah.
He's going to come in, he's going to throw gas.
Mm-hmm.
He may or may not throw strikes. And his sliders elite. Right? Like from profiles, we're talking about too. And even though Miz was not throwing strikes and now all of a sudden became the best strike thrower in the major leagues, like does it to me it would make a whole heck of a lot of sense for the Brewers right now at 32 to take Jack Bauer and just do the same thing they did with Miz. Dude,
Jack Bauer, and who did you take with them at their first pick? Merrick Houston? That's such a fascinating pairing. I like it. I mean, it's weird, and the Brewers do weird things, so I don't hate it at all. So you're taking Bauer for the Brewers. at 32. That's certainly fun. The Brewers are certainly excellent at pitching development. Red Sox are back on the clock at 33. This is the pick they acquired in the Quinn Priester trade. We've got 4 more picks to make here on the home stretch. They took Gavin Fiend with their first pick. I'm looking at a couple of options here that are starting to look very appealing. I'm mostly looking at college bats. There's a couple of college arms that I think make sense too, like Patrick Forbes would be an option I find interesting, but I'm also seeing college bats that I deem to be good value here. I'm going to go with Brendan Summerhill. He's ranked 24th by consensus. I think he's a really good player dev fit for the Red Sox. A little bit Christian Campbell vibes in that if someone can layer power on him and extra base impact with consistency, he could be a monster. He has a really good approach. It's good bat to ball skills. I think he has a good chance to stick in center. He's certainly good value here at 33. So that books you back on the clock at 34 with the Detroit Tigers' second pick.
Yeah, so I got Gavin Keelan with their first pick, which was a steal.
Yep.
And so I'm going to go the college route pitching this time and go Patrick Forbes.
Brutal.
From Louisville, 6'3", 220 pounds, 32 by consensus. So another good value pick for the Tigers.
I like that pick a ton. The Tigers farm system is kind of scary good at the moment. Okay, finally, my moment has come. The second Mariners pick, the team flush with picks and cash. We took Iva Arquette at 3. The reason that we took Iva Arquette at 3 is we are paying down one of my favorite preps in the class, 235, and we're taking Josh Hammond, 18-year-old prep shortstop out of Wesleyan Academy, North Carolina, 6'1", 205, right-handed hitting. The bat's really taken a step forward recently, a chance for like a really fun and intriguing power speed combo. The Mariners will be able to get a good couple of prep hitters that interest them or prep pitchers that interest them in addition to some good college talent if they go college at 3. So Josh Hammond given a huge overslot bonus by the Mariners at 35. And that's going to put you on the board with the last on the clock. Dude, I'm losing it. That's going to be you on the clock with the last pick of the night, which is the Minnesota Twins at 36, after which we will answer a few listener questions, then get out of here.
So Twins at 36, so we would underslot with Devin Taylor, which is going to allow them to really take whoever they want here and probably trickle some dollars down later where they could get some other guys, or at least have more of an option to do, whether it's money that they pay someone in round 2 or money that they pay someone in round 3, or just bigger bonuses that they can give guys on day 2, right? There's tons of options. And when I say day 2, in my mind, I'm thinking old school day 3.
Yeah.
So like round 11, where you're capped at a certain range, otherwise it counts towards your pool. All of a sudden you give a guy $375,000 because you can, and now you're buying him out of a commitment. So one of the names that we talked about, and just knowing what the Twins like. So age plays a part, right? So if you're a high schooler that's 17 versus a high schooler if you're 19, the 17-year-old is that's going to weigh heavily. They've drafted heavy out of the state of California.
Know where you're going, and I like it.
So there's a prep pitcher out of the state of California, and you can say the name correctly for me.
Angel Cervantes.
Angel Cervantes.
There you go.
Angel and not Angel?
Well, we'll get corrected, I'm sure, if we're wrong.
Okay. So tell that's my pick to end this.
Yep.
Okay. Tell me all everybody need to know about him.
Yeah, so we actually talked about him a little bit on the space yesterday. Let me pull up my notes quick. So Cervantes is 50th by consensus at the moment. He's been really steady in that range. 17 years old, undrafted, as you mentioned. 6'2", 190, right-handed throwing. He's like a pitchability prep righty, right? So things in his favor. Really good delivery, smooth, repeatable. You're going to bank on adding strength to that frame. The 6'2", 190 in terms of his his pitch mix. Fastball that sits 90 to 92, has touched 94, good ride, plays well at the top of the strike zone. He has one of the better changeups in the class. Has a ton of fade and drop and kind of one of those like falls off the table changeups. That's like a swing and miss right now pitch that he knows how to deploy well. I think there's work to do on the breaking stuff, but so like he has a curveball and a slider. The shapes there can kind of blur a little bit, which is pretty common for prep pitchers, but he has a good feel to spin. Good spin rates on both of those pitches. The other thing that I would offer up with Cervantes is he's just a really good strike thrower, right? And one thing we know about the Twins and their pitching tendencies is they're going to lean into guys that have above average to plus control, and they're going to say, we're going to help you be nasty in the zone and beat people in the zone. We're going to add pitches. We're going to add velo. We'll work on the rest of the stuff as long as you can throw strikes. So I think he checks a lot of those boxes. He's a guy I think is a fascinating arm and should be someone the Twins are considering with one of their second 2 picks. That's all I got. That's all I got.
we got 36 picks done in an hour and 12 minutes. So if the draft works at the same rate, 3 times that puts you at 4 hours.
Oh.
So they won't, because we'll be at about 7. So
dude, what I'm gonna need food. I'm gonna need to eat during this.
We're gonna have a lot of people. We're gonna have a lot of guests. We're gonna have a lot of
That's
rotating hours. But this is a good warm up to our gauntlet of a day Sunday, which is going to be fun. But hey,
I just need
it's gonna be a lot.
Theo, I need you in better shape this year than last year.
I will be 100% because I will be at Target Field, and I need to be in good shape to be there at 10 a.m. Sunday morning. So
Good. That's what I need.
I will be responsible.
All right, let's finish with a couple of listener questions. We'll just again, quick shout out to Michael. He came up with that hypothetical that led us to Devin Taylor and Angel Cervantes for the Twins with their first 2 picks. His version was Andrew Fisher at 16, comp pick Cruz Schoolcraft, and then second round of Sean Gamble. We don't like the same prep profiles, but that's okay. And I love the creativity. I think that's really fun. SWR Truther, dude, people's Twitter handles, I cannot. Here's a quick fire for you, Jeremy. Anderson or Holiday at number 1 if you're on the clock. Who are you taking and why?
Holiday.
Because
I'm taking Ethan Holiday if I'm running the show, because I think Ethan Holiday has superstar potential. And although I say it all the time, how often you get the chance to draft like the front end starter, it's not often. I'm not convinced though that, and I do think Kid Anderson's the best pitcher, and I've said that for a while. But if you could trade down, like, is there a huge difference? And I've said something like this. I do think there's a gap between Anderson and Doyle and Arnold, right? But I think the gap between Holiday and Parker is maybe a little bit greater.
Okay.
And I think JoJo Parker could be a superstar. You never know what you're going to get with these high school guys. But I just think, gun to my head, I think Ethan Holiday has a better professional career. And if you can get a guy that can impact a lineup like that for 150 games, that's more significant than a guy that's going to start 30.
Okay. I think I agree with that logic. And then he asked one more question. I will take a stab at this. Who is a player you see sliding? I don't, there'll probably be a surprise slide on day 1 in our draft. It was not Cason Cunningham. It was Kyson Witherspoon. I don't think that's going to happen. Cason Cunningham is a guy who I can see potentially sliding a little bit. Older for the class, smaller statured player. Doesn't have a ton of steam for a team, 2 teams. It's a plus hit tool. I really like him as a prospect, but he's a guy I could see. Seth Hernandez, I don't think is going to slide, but we did have some challenges finding logical landing spots for him. If you get past, I think, like the Mariners at 3, that becomes interesting and maybe a little bit of a challenge. But I think the answer to that question is probably someone that we're not expecting. And that's a whole fun. That's like the whole point and the whole fun of Friday or of Sunday night is we're going to see crazy things that we didn't expect to see. And so again, we'll close with like the only thing that we should expect is surprises.
Right. And I do think if we look at the history of the draft, a right-handed prep guy falling makes sense.
Yeah.
Who's the next highest rated prep righty on your board?
After Seth Hernandez,
Yep.
It is. Hold on, dude.
It's a while, huh?
It's such a while.
And because of that,
Aaron Watson, 43rd.
right. So Seth Hernandez falling is not going to surprise people because that's what happens to prep pitchers. The supply and the demand, it just doesn't work right. And so they're all going to command huge money. And probably most of the best pitchers in baseball came from the high school ranks, right? Over time, if you look at it, obviously Skeens went to the Air Force and then LSU, but I think the NIL thing is really a factor here. But I do think you're right. That group of prep shortstops, because we kind of all bunched them into like, 1 through 12.
Yep.
But the reality is, if Holiday goes 4,
yep,
that trickle down effect, it's going to push college pitchers up, and it's going to push these prep shortstops, who will also have some of them just because of how things work. One of them probably has an unreasonable demand, right? And so I would say we see the college guys float up, we see the high school guys float down, and it's pretty common with what we see most years.
All right. We will call it a day there. Extra long live stream and prep for Sunday. Friendly reminder, we are going to be with you guys at 4:30 Central on Sunday. Hope to catch you guys, but the draft on mute. Have us on, especially if you're a fan of one of those 6 teams that we talk about the most. We're going to have special guests. We're going to be breaking down every single pick. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hope to see you guys there. Thanks so much for supporting the show. You will see a couple more board updates on Friday, and then Sunday morning will be the final version of the consensus board, 136 picks and profiles there for you guys. Looking forward to the day finally being here. Until then, stay safe. We will catch you guys in a couple of days for night 1 of the 2025 MLB draft.